Hello, this is Deborah Clay, author of The Borrowed Boy and Just Be and presenter of Castaway Books. Each week I invite an author to tell me about the books that have inspired their life and influenced their writing. This week's guest is Zelah Roberts. I'm delighted to welcome to my Castaway Island this week Zelah Roberts, whose debut novel, Midsummer Man, came out on Midsummer's Day, on June the 14th, published by Totally Banned. So that's really exciting. And congratulations, Zelah.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a very strange time to have your first book come out. It's a magical feeling. It's really it's a really strange feeling to have an ambition that you've had for years and years and years come true. And when something seems so impossible, that when it happens, it's quite odd. But I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying the idea that people are reading the book now.
Really exciting. I'm so pleased for you. I think when you hold that first copy of your novel, it's like holding your newborn. It's just...
I cried. I actually cried when somebody put it in my hand and went, there you go. And just seeing a real live copy of it. And it was an actual book, not a pile of paper or a manuscript. Magic, absolute magic. I would definitely say to anyone who wants to write a book, do it, because it's the best feeling in the world.
Absolutely. And it takes a lot of blood, sweat and tears, perseverance and determination, but it's worth every bit.
It took years, absolutely years of working on my writing before I got to the point where it was possible to write a good book. But I love writing. When I'm writing, the world just sort of vanishes, and it's the most fabulous feeling. So definitely, it's definitely the thing to do.
It does take you into a different place, a different world, doesn't it?
It does. It really does.
Okay, so we're looking forward to hearing about your life and your journey to get to where you are today. And we're going to do that, as we always do, through hearing about the books that have inspired your life and influenced your writing. So book number one.
Well, book number one is the first book I ever remember reading. And it's called Home for a Bunny by Margaret Wise Brown. And it has the most glorious illustrations by Garth Williams, who also illustrated lots of other books, including Charlotte's Web and Stuart Little as well. And this book, it was published first in 1956, but by the time I got it, it must have been about 1973. And it proves its popularity because you can still buy it. It's still in print even now. And it's the perfect book for little toddlers, kind of 2 to sort of 4 years old, I would think, would really love this book. Not only because of the illustrations, but because the story has this wonderful musical quality. And a lot of the words are very simple, but the rhythm really helps them. Home for a bunny, home, home, home. Under a log, under a stone, where can a bunny find a home? And on it goes. And it really struck a chord with me when I was little, because I read it around the time that I started nursery. And for me, nursery was a really challenging time. It was the first time I've been away from my mum, and just to go to this big place with big high windows that you couldn't really see out of, loads of children and noise and chaos. I'm the oldest child in our family, so at the time when I went to nursery, there were no other children in the house, and I was used to kind of quiet and calm, and it was a huge kind of culture shock to go to nursery, and I really didn't like it at all. And Home for a Bunny is about a little bunny who doesn't have a home, and he goes around and he asks lots of different little animals if he can live with them, and they all say no, until finally he finds another little bunny and they settle down in their little burrow together. And it was even at such a tiny, you're so small, but your emotions are not. Your emotions are big and you're scared and it's a big wide world out there. And to think that this little bunny did find a friend and a place that was safe and happy was a kind of beacon of hope, I suppose you would say, for me as a little girl. So obviously I went to school and finally it did happen and I got friends and it all settled down. But that little bunny helped me a lot at a time when it was really difficult for me. So I would definitely recommend Home for a Bunny for any little children in the family. And it was also a really great book
Yeah.
in terms of helping me to learn to read. So I struggled quite a lot to learn to read when I was at school. I had and have dyspraxia, but then it wasn't really recognised. It's a bit like dyslexia, but it affects coordination. It makes it really difficult to do all sorts of physical movements. You get confused between your left and your right. So it becomes really difficult to do things like catch a ball or tie shoelaces or put your clothes on. But it's also really difficult when it comes to learning to write, because when you write letters, it requires you to know which way round lines go. So with my name, which has a Z in it, does the line go that way or that way to join the top and the bottom? And it's got an E, and does the E go that way or that way? And it's got an A, and does the tail go that side or that side? And I used to write everything almost like mirror writing, the wrong way around. And so it was really hard to learn to write, and it was really difficult to learn to read, because when you read, you sort of lose your place on the lines, so you end up reading the same line twice and things like that. And so it was like a massively stressful experience being at school. But this book really helped because it had lots of repeated words, quite simple words. You could sort of almost guess the words from the rhythm and the sounds. And so it really helped me to learn to read. But it's also a very emotional book. It does clutch at the heartstrings. And the books I was reading at school, God, this is showing me age, Peter and Jane. I used to read the Ladybird Peter and Jane books, but they were very much like, Jane has a dog. The dog is called Pat. And there was no feeling in them at all. Whereas this little book had lots of emotion in it. It made me want to read it. And therefore, it really helped me to get into reading, which is a good job, really, because it's helped me for the rest of my life. So there we go.
Something you said there about small children have big emotions, and it's really important, the role that books play, even for, as you say, under fives, how important it is. That was really interesting.
I think you can tell because, like, almost everyone that you speak to remembers the books that they had when they were really tiny. People remember The Hungry Caterpillar and all of those kinds of books because they mean a lot to a small child. So I do think they're important.
But they seem to have come about in more recent years, because you're saying, marks your age, I'm sure I'm older than you, mine were Janet and John books, but I don't remember there being these beautiful illustrated poetic rhythmic books when I was a child. And I used to go to the library with my mum and dad, but I remember having pages with big images and like A is for apple, and
yes,
it was cold and sterile. I used to have made up stories and fairy tales, Cinderella and Jack the Beanstalk and nursery rhyme, but they didn't have those lovely illustrated books that we have today. I don't remember them.
No. And some of the books today are just absolutely magical. Have you read Babette Cole? She did Princess Smarty Pants and all these absolutely fabulous books, maybe for a touch old, maybe sort of 6 or 7. And they sort of subvert fairy tales so that the princess is really independent, and the prince, she doesn't approve of the prince. He chops somebody's head off, and she's like, well, why would I want him?
Excellent.
So I think, yeah, today's children's books are just magical. And I think, giving children books is a great gift, really.
Excellent. Excellent. Great. So shall we go on to your book number 2?
Yes. Well, here's a contrast. Rat Race by Dick Francis. And if Home for a Bunny was the first children's book I ever remember reading, Rat Race was the first adult book I ever read. And it came about because as I was growing up and as I was at school, dyspraxia has a horrible way of isolating children, because if you're rubbish at PE and sports and you can't catch a ball to save your life and you trip over your own feet, no problem, and at the same time you're not very good academically because you're struggling with your reading and your writing and your counting, you tend to sort of feel that you're not very good at anything and become quite withdrawn about things. And so for me, I resorted to the school bookshelf. They didn't have a library, but they did have a bookshelf, and it was a really good one. And I sort of whipped my way through all of these fabulous books. They had The Wombles and 101 Dalmatians and, all sorts of things like that. But I'd never read an adult book. And I used to go to the library every week with my dad, get a big pile of books, pinch his library card so I could get more. But by the end of the week, I was always running out of something to read. And one particular evening, I was moping around the house, and he said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "Oh, I've got nothing left to read." And he said, "Oh, here, try this." And he just pulled this Dick Francis novel off the shelf. And I was really flattered, because I was like, oh, he thinks I can read a grown-up book. And I settled down and I read it in a sitting. I just went straight through it. Never read a book that had kind of murder and suspense in it before. And oh my goodness, have you read a Dick Francis?
No, I'm afraid I haven't.
Oh, it's got the best hero in the world. Oh, my first ever book crush. Really wonderful. Really wonderful characters, and really, really snappy dialogue as well. And I absolutely loved it. And so straight away, I was back in the library, getting all the Dick Francis books off the shelf, zoomed through them. But after that was it. It opened up the world of adult writing to me. So I started off following with more thrillers, and ended up with kind of Desmond Bagley and Alistair MacLean. And then discovered Ed McBain, who writes like police procedurals, and then discovered that he also writes as what's his name? It's gone. This is another thing this dyspraxia does say. Evan Hunter, that's right. And he wrote like literary American novels, and then I got stuck into those. And from there, it just blossomed out until I was reading, 1984, A Clockwork Orange, absolutely everything. And by that time, I was coming up to sort of sixth form years, and English was an absolute passion.
It's lovely as well, having something that connects you with your father. I know for myself, sharing a love of reading with my father and sharing books was important to me, and it's come out as a theme with other authors as well, that sort of connection with a parent through sharing the love of similar books.
We are ridiculous. When I pick up the phone, the first thing my dad says is, "Have you read anything good recently?" And we swap books all the time. And my mum as well. My mum didn't used to read so much when I was little, I guess because I had a brother and a sister. But now that, the house is calmer, she reads a lot as well. And it is a really great way to sort of share things together. Mm-hmm.
That's great. And you didn't write thrillers yourself. Would you call what you write romantic suspense? Is that the category?
I would. Mm-hmm. I don't think that I would ever say that I would never do it, but romance was definitely my kind of first love. Mm-hmm.
Did you try writing a thriller, or did you always write romance?
No, I tried writing fantasy first because I love that as well. Because, well, so many of these things, even Dick Francis novels, have romance in them. Lots of fantasy novels have romance in them. And so I'm quite happy to kind of mix genres. And I guess it's how much emphasis you put on the romance versus the other aspects of the story that that sort of defines where you put it in the whole scheme of things. So yeah, I think in future I'll do different types of things as well.
So you loved English at sixth form,
Mm.
and then we'll go on to your next book, which is The Prelude by William Wordsworth. I did it for you.
Yes.
And
Wow. Oh, wow. Well, I went to university in Lampeter, which is part of the University of Wales, and it is this beautiful, beautiful leafy outpost of the University of Wales. It's in quite a small town, and the campus is arranged around this gorgeous building called the Old Building, which was built in the 1800s. And it was such a lovely place. And although there wasn't a lot there, there's no cinema or anything like that. Because of that, everybody who was there set up clubs. There was much more interaction than I think you get in a university now. So there were film clubs and theatre clubs and mountaineering and hiking and all sorts of stuff. And I really, really loved it. I found people there who loved books as much as I did. There were people to talk to about English all the time. And the syllabus just opened out the whole magical world of English literature. And oh my word, I absolutely loved my life, really loved it. And one of the things that I really discovered a love for was poetry. And until I'd gone to university, I hadn't really had much to do with it. I'd done a little bit during O levels. God, show me age again. And so I'd read a bit of sort of John Betjeman and Philip Larkin. But beyond that, I hadn't read much. And then I got to university, and in the very first week, they gave us some John Donne to read. And John Donne was one of the metaphysical poets. And their poetry is full of really vivid images, but you have to kind of think about them and sort of imagine them and then piece the images together to create a meaning from those poems. And I had no clue what to do when I first saw it. Oh, I looked at it and I thought, oh my goodness. So I'm out of my depth here. So I trundled off to my friend Joanna's bedroom and said to Joanna, have you seen this? What is it? And she was like, oh, it's easy. Give it here. And we sat with a cup of coffee and a box of grapes. And and she talked me through how to just slow down and pick an image out of a poem and think about it. And once you start to think about it and break them down, these poems, they just open up. They're like flowers. They just open out and the meaning is there and it's beautiful. And in fact, that's why there is a quote from a John Donne poem in Midsummer Man, because, it means a lot to me. But in the second year, I met the Romantic poets. And the Romantic poets focused very much on nature and the effects of nature on somebody's psyche. And William Wordsworth wrote quite a lot about the sublime, about that feeling that you get when something is so beautiful and so awe-inspiring. It's almost frightening. You sometimes get that kind of feeling when you're on a mountaintop or something like that, and it's like the world is below you and it's quite breathless, that feeling of being so small in such a mighty universe. And The Prelude is a book that he wrote, and it's an autobiography as well as being a poem. I mean, it's huge. It's 14 books long. It's about 8,000 lines of poetry, but it's not poetry that it's not very difficult to read at all, and it's easy to follow. But it follows Wordsworth's life all the way through from being a child, to coming home, to his father passing away, to going to university, to travelling across the Alps, visiting France, coming back, going to London, back to the Lake District. And it sweeps you away, and it absolutely sweeps you away in this glorious landscape. And it was the first time I really understood how writing about landscape and setting can really link in to the emotion for the reader and for the character as well. And even now, I mean, I read. I'm really terrible. I'm a night owl, and often I'll go to bed listening to the dawn chorus, but I'll never do that without thinking about Wordsworth getting up early to walk around the lake while he listened to the dawn chorus. So yeah, really beautiful poetry to read.
Grateful to you for introducing that to me, because when I was looking up the books before meeting with you today, I put that on my to be read list because it just sounded wonderful. And I just love what you said just now about slowing down sufficiently to really read, take something in, and like a flower opening. That's beautiful, because I'm trying to read poetry to support lots of the poets that I meet on Twitter and in the writing community. And there's lots of good poets there. And I try and read the work, and I'm not slowing down enough to appreciate.
Yes.
And yet when I was at school studying W.B. Yeats, who I love, I did have poetry, and I used to write poetry. But I think the way I read now, and the way, even though I meditate and I try to take things slowly, I don't settle in once I've got the written word with the poetry to give it the time. So I love nature. I love, as you say, that rapture that you have when you have some beautiful, breathtaking view in front of you. And I just love the thought about reading that work, and, as you say, taking the time. So that will be my next meditation. It will be taking a poem and focusing on it and imagining it opening like a flower. So thank you for that, Zelda.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay, and beautifully put. So shall we go on to your fourth book?
Oh, right. Okay. Well, after I finished university, I did all sorts of different jobs, but eventually I ended up doing teacher training. And I was teacher training to teach kind of teenagers and adults. And I ended up in a job where I was teaching mostly 16 to 18-year-olds who didn't have very high reading ages. And it became a real challenge to find books that suited their level of maturity, but also suited their reading age. It's really hard to find those kind of crossover books that will appeal to somebody who's older, but have the language that's simple enough for them to be able to read. And so I was keeping my ear to the ground for suitable books for them, because I think that if you can find a book that triggers off a child's imagination, you can get them into reading. And as soon as you find that one book that triggers them, they'll go off and they'll read all sorts. And the minute they start to read, then their English picks up beautifully, their reading becomes more fluent, they enjoy it, and their writing picks up, then they start to enjoy creative writing. And the whole thing is just an absolute winner. But you have to find that one book to start them with. So I've been, looking out for books as I was teaching, and I started to hear these mutters about Harry Potter. It was long before they were famous. And the grapevine was sort of saying, "Oh yeah, Harry Potter, quite good. Try that." And I'd sort of not got round to it when I discovered that I was pregnant. Oh, well, when I found out I was pregnant, I was absolutely overjoyed, but I was really scared. When you just think, what's it going to be like having a baby? And am I going to be any good as a mum? And all of that. And I was just in a tailspin. I was just panicking. And as per usual, I did what I always do when I'm panicking, which is go and find a book. So I wandered into WH Smith's, and I bought the first Harry Potter book. And I got on the bus, took it home, read it, got back on the bus, went back and bought the other two that were out at the time, and read all three of them, no problem, and loved them, absolutely loved them. And having read them, I then heard that J.K. Rowling was doing a book reading and signing in Glasgow, in a few months further down the line. And I said to my family, I was like, right, that's it. We have to go to Glasgow. 4:00 in the morning, we have to go. I was 8 months pregnant. We got up. Sorry?
Where were you living at that time when you said go to Glasgow?
Durham. We were living in Durham. So it was about 3.5, 4-hour trip to get there. So I bundled us all into the car and off we went. And the queue to get in was massive, and it was pouring with rain. And I was at that point where, like, even just walking feels like a real chore. But it was worth it. We got in and we listened to her read the first chapter of her new book, which was the 4th one. And then we stood in the queue for another couple of hours to get our book signed. But it was such a lovely experience. And after that, it wasn't very long then until my son was due to arrive, and he was overdue. And when a baby is overdue, they tell you to have lots of hot baths because that will make them come. So I spent a week practically living in the bath, and I read all of the Harry Potter books in a row in the bath that week. So whenever I think of
like they do for babies, they're plastic, so they won't go soggy in the bath.
Well, yes, they were looking a bit worn by the time I'd finished. But because of that, whenever I think of Harry Potter, I think of really the best moment of my life when my son was born. And after that, in the years following, whenever she brought a book out, I'd take him to the midnight opening to get his book dressed up as a little wizard. And then my sister and my grandma and my auntie all got into them as well. And we used to sort of go as a family tribe we'd go for something to eat, go for a meal, and then go to the shop to get the book at midnight. And it was always just such a wonderful experience. So yeah.
Does your son know the relevance of Harry Potter towards his being bringing him into the world? Does he know about that history?
I don't think he does, but he does know I love Harry Potter.
It'd be hard for him not to.
Oh, definitely. Every now and again, they come back out and I reread them all. And since then she's done quite a few other things as well. So have you tried the Robert Galbraith books that she wrote?
Oh, but my friend, a neighbour friend, she adores her, and she's just gone on holiday, and she's taken a book that was about that fat with her, written by her under that name to read while she was away. So I shall hear all about that one.
Oh, definitely. Yes, I must admit, I really like that series as well. Yeah, really good. Anyway.
Well, so your son, does he read Harry Potter as well? When
he
was
did.
younger, when he was little.
He did. He is. He likes sort of fantasy type novels now. When he was younger, he got really into kind of Goosebumps and things like that, and Scream Street, and all of those kinds of sort of slightly supernatural type books. And that's followed on for a theme for him. So he does like Harry Potter, but I would say that he's moved on to slightly scarier things.
Right. So it takes us to your final book.
Yes. Diana Gabaldon's Outlander book. I suppose it's the entire Outlander series is really what I mean by this. When I got to my 40th birthday, you know what it's like. You reflect back over what you've done in your life and what you wish you'd done and all of that kind of thing. And I was really happy. I had a nice partner, lovely son, good job, everything was fine. But I recognized that the one thing that I hadn't done was to fulfill that childhood ambition to write a book. And I thought, well, you're 40 years old. If you don't get a grip soon, you're going to be 65 sitting here wishing that you'd done it. And so I joined the Romantic Novelists Association New Writers Scheme, which is the most amazing scheme for people who want to write a romance. Absolutely phenomenal. And I wrote a book, and I sent it off. I got back some feedback, and it was kind feedback. But what the reviewer said was that she thought that my hero was a bit of a bully and that my heroine was a bit insipid. And, once I'd got over the kind of like huff, then I thought, actually, you're right. If I met these two in real life, I wouldn't like them. And I realized that I'd been writing heroes and heroines that were a lot like the characters in the 80s romances that I used to read when I was a teenager. And I suddenly realized that what I actually wanted was characters who were both strong and both independent. And I didn't want characters who relied on each other for sort of economic support. I wanted it to be an emotional interaction between the characters. And I wanted them both to end up in a relationship where they were equals. And that sort of thought was percolating through my mind when I went to a friend's house for a drink one night, and a wonderful friend, and she said to me, hey, have you ever seen Outlander on the telly? And I was like, no. And she said, oh, you've got to watch this. You've got to watch this. So she put it on, and we watched sort of 5 minutes, and I was completely hooked. And I came back home and, of course, bought the book, and then sat and read it and absolutely loved it. But one of the things that I really loved about it was the way that her characters are both really strong characters, both independent, both quite fiery, both with flaws, but they complement each other, that where one needs something, the other one can help with that. But it doesn't diminish either of them by doing that. They both have equal levels of power. And I realized that that's what I like in my real life. I want an equal relationship where, where we are friends and close together. But I didn't want something where one person is weaker than the other and one's stronger. And so that really helped me to write Midsummer Man, because I decided that that's the kind of characters that I wanted. Really strong, independent characters who could help and support each other through their past and their present to finally achieve a happy ever after. And so Outlander is definitely my fifth choice.
And which channel on the television would we find it on? Is it on a Netflix?
Good question. It was on Amazon to start with, but I think now it's also playing on terrestrial TV, but I'm not exactly sure which channel it's on.
Have to Google that. Now, you
Definitely.
did, when we were talking earlier, you also said something very interesting about when you're writing sex scenes, when a person's writing sex scenes. Did you want to talk about that as well? Because I found that very insightful and interesting.
Well, I debated I suppose anyone who writes a romance has to think about what kind of sex scenes, if any, they want in their book. And I was humming and hawing about it because, to what degree did I want it to be a kind of closed door story or open door story or what? And Outlander really helped to clarify my thoughts on that, because in Outlander, there are some open door sex scenes, but they are there to really show the intimacy in the relationship and to move the relationship on. And I read a book by Diana Gabaldon called I Give You My Body, which is actually about how to write sex scenes. And it even talks about how to write non-sex sex scenes where you just want it to have that feel without necessarily having any action. And she said that sex is an emotional interaction between two people, and people have sex for all kinds of reasons. So you can have angry sex or comforting sex, or sex for all sorts of reasons to be with each other. So that really clarified my thinking on what to do with Midsummer Man, because I thought, no, I want sex scenes in there to show the intimacy between the characters, but I want them there to show the emotional interaction between the characters, so that they can be doing that for comfort or for whatever reason, and that way sex is a part of a romantic
expression,
emotional relationship, and so I wanted the reader to enjoy like that full experience of love in whatever form it is, but I did want it to communicate all of the emotions between the characters.
I love that. That is such a really good way of explaining it. And I was beta reading for an author recently, and the sex scene, it wasn't an explicit sex scene, but it just felt out of place because the emotion didn't match all the other emotion. It should have been poignant and a little bit sad at the time that they were having sex. And when you say that, it makes it so clear as to why it didn't work. It's very insightful, and I'm sure viewers, listeners will find that really helpful, that reference. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And Midsummer Man has just come out. Are you working on something else at the moment?
I am. I'm working on two things at the moment. I'm working on a partner story to go with Midsummer Man. There are two characters in there, James and Lainey, whose romance I would like to write next. So I'm working on that one. And on a complete and wild departure, I'm also having a go at an Amish romance. So, so yes, those two things are on the go at the moment.
Excellent. I wish you success with those.
Thank you.
It's brought me to the final question, which is, which luxury would you like to have on the Castaway Island?
I think I would like a magic lantern, please. Pardon?
You don't want much, a magical lantern.
A magical lantern. Not only because it would be nice to be able to rub it and get 3 wishes, but also so that I could read at night. So no point being in a desert island without light, is there?
Might also keep off all the mosquitoes and things with the light. So it would have multi-purpose, wouldn't it?
You see, it's the perfect wish.
And it would have a constant flame, so you'd always be able to make a fire.
And maybe if there's fresh water there and some leaves, I might even manage to make a cup of tea.
Yep. And it would act as a beacon if any passing ships came by.
See, we've sorted it. Perfect.
Luxury gift. You're welcome to that. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Zelda. I just wish we could talk for longer. It's over so quickly. And thank you for so many helpful, insightful comments through your books and through your life. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this week's episode of Castaway Books. References for all of the books discussed in this show can be found on my website, which is www.abrakdeborah.com. deborah.wordpress.com. It's the letter K and then my name, Deborah. Deborah. So until next week, goodbye.